I talked to eCapital News Director Sean Ashley about news at the Capitol. Sean, a big development this week was the resignation of Speaker of the House T.W. Shannon from that position in order to run for the U.S. Senate.
That's right, and what that sets the stage for is an election on Monday. At present, there appear to be two primary candidates. Representative Jeff Hickman, a Republican from sort of northwestern Oklahoma, and House Speaker pro tempore Mike Jackson, who's also from pretty much the same area. I think their districts actually abut one another. Both are out trying to round up votes. It's almost like any other election that we'll be seeing this year, except in this case, the primary takes place in the Republican caucus, which will meet sometime Monday morning, and they will choose a nominee from among their members who will then be taken to the floor where the full House will vote on it. There will also be an opportunity where Democrats could nominate one of their own, or perhaps even a Republican that they want to offer up as a coalition choice. And there will be an election between the two of them, and a new speaker will be chosen. And then he assumes all those duties and powers that former Speaker Shannon has had the last year, appointing committee chairman and helping set the daily agenda. In other words, there could be big changes or there could be no changes at all. We'll just have to wait and see.
There was also a lot of talk this last week of the budget, obviously, for obvious reasons. And one of the things that the governor talked about in her State of the State address was taking some money, 10%, from the revolving funds of state agencies. What are those revolving funds, and why is that of interest?
Well, revolving funds is really sort of an umbrella term. It represents a wide variety of things. Most often what revolving funds involve are various fees that agencies collect. When you pay for your driver's license, for example, that money goes into a revolving fund. If you get a license from a particular government agency, that money goes into a revolving fund. According to Secretary of Finance Preston Dorflinger, at the end of each fiscal year, there's about $830 million sitting in revolving funds. The governor's budget recommends taking $83 million of that and using it for general government expenses. The problem with that may be that in many instances, parts of that $830 million by state law are for very specific functions. For example, money collected by the Department of Consumer Credit is very specifically designated for their various licensing and enforcement programs. So much of that money, for example, probably could not be diverted. Other money has more liberal uses. It's not specified in law, and so they could tap some of that to use for other purposes.
A major reason that finding money is important is because the state is facing a $170 million revenue shortfall, although Treasurer Ken Miller is saying that he thinks that number is going down.
Right. The Board of Equalization will meet again on February 18th to issue the final revenue estimate for this legislative session. It's the number that will be used to write the final budget. Typically what we see between December and February when that second estimate takes place is a look at the various economic factors. And what we've seen for the last 6 weeks or so have largely been positive. We saw fairly good sales during the Christmas season. Despite the weather of late, the overall economy seems to be plugging along rather well. So as a result, the Tax Commission, which prepares most of the numbers for the estimate, is expected to look at those and say our economy is doing a bit better than what we saw in December, and so that revenue estimate will be a touch higher.
Sean, what do you think will be the first bills to move through the legislature?
That's always an interesting question because we have those years where there's a big issue that has to move right away, and it does. And then there are other years where there are small pieces of legislation. Already this week, we saw a number of bills move through committee, and none of them are particularly significant. They're significant, of course, to their authors, but in terms of changing the individual tax rate, the individual income tax rate in the state, or altering the way we send individuals to prison, none of that's happening yet. A lot of that may depend on the budget and the policies that are going to be built around it.
Sean Ashley, News Director of eCapital, thank you as always.
You're very welcome.